Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Well, you know what we do. We spoil things, and we are about to start covering Moon Knight. This is episode 1, The Goldfish Problem.
Yeah.
Excellent.
The goldfish problem.
My notes. Well, I mean, I know how it starts. It starts with the Harrow drinking some water, crushing up the glass, and putting it in his sandals so that he can walk on it all day.
Yep.
That's intense.
That's someone you don't want to have at a party.
No, I don't want that guy at a party at all, especially when we get to see what he does later as a party trick.
Oh, yeah, it's a terrible trick. It's very judgmental. I feel like
it's very true.
One of it's shocked me that we were opening up with him, but I mean, like, it's just a couple of shots, and I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see where this is going. They're establishing that we're being serious about it. Great, let's do it.
The next shot or the next scene is Stephen Grant waking up. And we get to see basically everything he puts into making sure that he doesn't sleepwalk, I'm assuming, is what he thinks is happening. So yeah, he's put stuff in place to make sure that that he doesn't leave the bed, that he doesn't leave the room. There's all sorts of stuff put in place for that.
Yeah. Or that there's evidence of it if he does, so he's aware of something happening at least. Yeah.
It's not to stop him. It is exactly what you said. Sorry. Yes. It's to have evidence that he left.
Yeah. Like the sand at the footsteps and all that. Can't fake that. Yeah, for sure.
So you're right. Yes. That was definitely to show what he does so that he can have proof of leaving the actual room. He heads to the museum where he's like clearly like overqualified for whatever job he actually has. I don't really know what he has, because his manager seems to be like, all you're supposed to do is sell this stuff to kids, and he's kind of just
well, he's
got a lot of information shop. Obviously.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he knows a lot.
He wants to do tours.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, by this point, I am on board with Stephen Grant. I like he isn't as capable as a Clark Kent, and I mean that from the original 78 movie, like how we really liked that version of Clark Kent, that like you know that he knows what's going on. Like I think we both went into it thinking like, oh, he's just gonna be like an idiot when he's Clark Kent, but he actually had an edge to him.
Yeah, he had a backbone. And I feel like he was his own person. He was his own guy.
And I feel like this is a version of that without just doing the same thing. Like he does talk back. He does have somewhat of, he is kind of like a doormat, but at least he doesn't go like, oh, that's okay. He does make comments here and there.
Yeah, I feel like he does. He protests unsuccessfly, but he does. He's very much like, hey, this is not right, but there's nothing I can do about this realistically. This sucks.
Exactly.
But he is aware of it. He's not just letting it happen. But I mean, and in some ways, there's inconsequentially, because there's nothing that he could do about it, he is just only allowed to let it happen. But it's sad to see, because he's, like you said, it sounds like he's very overqualified, talking about those Egyptian gods and all that kind of stuff on the poster.
I definitely feel like, oh yeah, I want to see him have a win. Like I feel like that's what is done well about it, is that he's not, I can tell that he wants more for himself. It's not like he's just like, yeah, I guess this is my lot in life. So I think that they do a very good job of that, making sure that I'm on board with seeing Stephen Grant get a win. Another interesting thing, I think everyone has talked this to death so far, which is he obviously set a date with a coworker
Yes.
who, if he doesn't remember, we only know of two identities, Stephen Grant and Mark Spector.
Yep.
Mark Spector doesn't speak with an English accent. So I
Mhm.
was just like, what happened with this woman that she was like, yeah, I mean, Steven asked me out in an American accent without any of Steven's qualities.
Yeah, because like I remember in high school, it's like, hey, oh, and scene, and
Mhm.
you'd have to make it believable to be like, oh, you're doing an Australian accent.
Yeah.
Well, he's clearly not asking me out, but if he's being cute about it, and I say yes, success. But you get to go back on, be like, nah, just kidding. How did that work? You're right. If Mark had like the American accent and
He could have done a British accent. The problem being, like, it's clear throughout the show that he doesn't have control over when he takes. I mean, that's not clear. I should say that
yeah,
it's not clear because we've seen him ask to take over, but also during certain parts that we'll get into, he clearly just takes over. So I'm
yeah.
not quite sure where that switch happens, where he's able
See, the
to take
funny
over.
thing to me is, up until this point, we're still not. To clarify, we haven't met Mark yet. We're just still with Steven, like the entire time.
Yeah, well, we haven't spent any time with Mark alone for sure.
Yes.
We've only spent time with Mark talking to Steven. So yeah, you're right. We don't know what
Yes.
Mark's about, other than his manager, who seems to know a lot about him. I mean, maybe that's kind of the joke. Like, he's vegan, so obviously everyone knows he's vegan. But like,
Yeah.
I think that it's like, she even says like, why would you take her to a steakhouse? What are you gonna eat there? You're a vegan. So there's all these clues making me, I guess, think that it must be Mark who asked out, because Steven is like, holy shit, you're talking to me, like, you're asking me out on a date. So it's not like he's like, oh yeah, like I have the guts to ask someone out. He's kind of
Oh
just
yeah.
like, wow, okay, great, this is happening. And also, yeah, he wouldn't have picked a steak house if he
Yeah.
was asking her out. I do think that's the stuff I was talking about earlier, where like, I know that if he were to ask her out, he wouldn't be like, oh, I'll just do whatever to get, like, he would still pick a place where he could eat a vegan meal if he was going
Yeah,
to ask.
it would be kind of like, hey, I the equivalent of I gotta keep kosher or something like that. You know what
exactly.
I mean? It would be it I would, yeah, he would protest that. So you're right. It's just like, for the coworker to say yes, but not know him well enough, and to say yes to the American accent, and to say yes to the fact that it's a steakhouse and he's known to be a vegan. It's a very unusual circumstance, because it's not even just
Well,
like, hey, there's the new person that's working here. And like, they didn't establish that. They just like,
no, they kind
oh,
of
she's
established that
working
they do
here.
talk, like,
Yeah,
because she's like, oh
exactly.
yeah, I only have the one of the, I've got another cooler, but yeah, like they had some form of banter before she gets into, and so obviously we're still on for tomorrow.
Yeah.
um but we'll see. Maybe I have to rewatch it. But I got the sense that it wasn't like she didn't know him, but maybe it really was just whatever conversation he had with that woman. As let's just assume Mark, we might get proven wrong later, but whatever conversation he had with her as Mark, maybe that was the first time they talked, and maybe to her, he was just a cute guy at work that she never talked to. So maybe that's why she doesn't
Yeah.
know that he's not or that he's vegan,
Mhm.
and she doesn't know that it's weird that he's now speaking in a British accent. Maybe she did think like, oh, he just put on like an American accent to like impress me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that's a something that we're gonna probably figure out later, I hope.
Yeah, but you know what though? I'm glad you pointed it out, because it is an inconsistency, and there's something like I do want to talk about later, because I know
Mhm.
it's like it's gonna be better once we get to the later scenes of the show, of this episode. But yeah, that's one inconsistency. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If we know that it's Mark and Steven's the one working here right now, then like, okay, maybe she's like, oh yeah, you're putting on a show, whatever it is. But it's just like, why is her reality not aligning with the boss's reality? You know what I mean? It's just like,
Well,
wait,
I
what?
I get the sense that obviously if he is just the gift shop, then yeah, maybe he only has passing stuff with her
Yep.
as an actual tour guide. So it's not like they're on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not saying, oh, it makes sense to me now. I'm just saying I understand more of the woman going on a date with him, not knowing much about him, and just
Yeah.
being like, well, I don't know, it was a cute guy and he asked me out.
Mm-hmm.
Because
It
it's
does
not
help.
like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like he looks like someone no one would ever want to talk to. He's just tweaked out because he has the issues he has, but it's not like he's still Oscar Isaac. A lot of people find him attractive, men and women. Like there's not they didn't like mess up his hair and put him like in Hollywood ugly clothing. He's still a good looking guy. So that part I understand. It's a weird thing that they've written in there if they're not going to explain it. It's like a thing that's like obviously like, well, how did that work?
Yeah. I'm sure it's gonna be explained at some point, but as the rest of the episode goes, it's kind of like this whole series is leading me to believe it's going to be like a jigsaw puzzle, but the only person putting it together is Stephen. That's how I feel about it so far. But like, let's
okay. Well, the next sequence is him. I skipped over a bunch of stuff because I feel like, as you said, it's later stuff that has like backpack. The meat. So basically, next is him talking to the golden statue man, which, it's sad. Like we talked about Peacemaker, where he only really had a relationship with Eagly, who can't talk back, and
in dangerous exotic
he indulged not Peacemaker, Vigilante, who also would just do whatever he said anyway. And so like this one-way communication to Gold Statue Man is interesting to see in this show, and not played for laughs this time, or even like what a narcissist it is. Just played like, this is, I guess this is it. This is the only time he gets his piece out uninterrupted.
I feel bad for the guy. It's obviously his form of therapy that he can afford. Just abusing a street performer, in knowing the fact that the street performer will not talk back. It's kind of like going to one of those British royal guards and just like, just running your mouth and seeing what happens.
I think the one part of that scene that I do like is that he asked the people to tip him after they ask for a picture. I'm like, that's good though. Like he is still looking out for the guy.
Yeah, he's like a
make sure to
buddy
tip.
in some way. Yeah.
I can't remember when this happens, but or maybe it's next, and I should try not to do it off the top of my head. Nope. He does talk to his mom before he goes back to his bed, right? Like I guess that's on his way to work.
That's on his way to work.
To her, and he's like, "Oh, sorry." That also endeared me with him. Like I know, or I shouldn't say I know. My assumption is no one's on the other end of that phone. Like he's not actually calling a mother.
Right. There's no click. There's no actual like, leave a message, voicemail.
But I like that he is like, it's showing that he cares about somebody.
Yes.
Whether or not they're on the other end of that line. I think that's always important with these types of characters, showing that there's something or someone they care about. For me, it's better when it's someone.
Sure. Yeah.
But and that's not to say like, they need to have a girlfriend. It is just somebody they care about,
right,
as much or more than themselves. So I liked that they layered that in, and I think it's obvious to most people that that's not his mom that he's talking to, because it's a voicemail, but also just kind of like adding the detail of, sorry, I missed you again, and like, I guess I'll catch you next time. It's kind of like, well, Steven, take the hint.
So but this is one of those things where I feel like this is inherently one of those clues that they're setting up that this may be related to his trauma. That you know what I mean? It's kind of like it kind of has that air of, the Zemo thing where he's calling the phone and listening to the voicemail over and over and over again, except this is just like, he's not listening, he's doing the talking, and whether or not someone else is listening is a different story. But you're right, he keeps having conversations with people that can't talk back and re-engage with him, and whenever he does, he's piecing together something. It's quite clear that that there is no mom, but whether or not the mom is inherently related to the trauma that is related to the dissociative identity disorder, to me is going to be something that's very, very interesting that I'm looking out for sure. Because I think there's something that has to do with mom.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a good call, that it's probably going to be mother related.
Heard it here first, folks.
I think yeah, next, not I think, next is him at home, and we see the effort he puts into his nighttime routine. I guess we saw him waking up out of it, but now we get to see everything he does to get
Mhm.
into the routine. And then he suddenly wakes up. I didn't know where he was. It's now it's been become clear to me he's in the Swiss Alps,
Mhm.
um, with
And
a dislocated jaw, and I'm just like,
yeah,
yikes.
and to be clear, he's like doing everything to like stay awake. He's got that tape, which is like, by the way, I just that tape of like, here's a guide to how to stay awake. Reading, I don't think is the first example that I would
No,
give in that situation. I'm like, that would put me to sleep immediately. That would not engage my brain whatsoever. I would read Harry Potter and I would find comfort in that and I would fall asleep.
yep.
That's just the reality of like how I would do it. It's a terrible, terrible book, but like he's staying asleep. He's audiobook. He's staying asleep. He's like clearly worried about something, and then flash, Swiss Alps,
He's in the
and
Swiss Alps, got a dislocated jaw.
mhm,
This is the first time we hear Khonshu, and
mhm. F.
also
Abraham.
we know for sure he does not like Steven.
No, he
You
does
know,
not.
he's like, oh my
No.
god, it's the idiot. Calls him a worm, a parasite.
Is that Khonshu or is that
That's
Steven?
Khonshu.
That's okay. That's okay.
That's
Yeah.
Khonshu, who's like, because I mean, they kind of are showing you through Harrow, who we're about to get into, that
Mhm.
this is how the gods work. They use their avatars, or they project into a human vessel. So
Yes.
Harrow is in control of what's going on
Mhm.
for Amit, and then Stephen is the vessel for Khonshu. But and I hate talking about that, not because I find it boring. I do still have an issue with the whole DID stuff in this because it seems like a bit too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like that's what's happening here, is that Khonshu took someone over who has DID, so Khonshu has to navigate and negotiate
Mhm.
who's taking over. What Mark taking over means he can do what he needs to do.
Mhm.
Stephen being in control means he's got to like wait him out, or get be a bit more active in what he
Right.
does, and like more of a puppet than usual. Puppet master is what I mean to say. But yeah,
Mhm.
you get this. He's up, and then I think you can piece together that he fell out of that window that the guy is looking out of.
Mhm.
I really do like that beat of him just waving, because I did not expect a gun to come out after. I was kind of just like, yeah, like that's weird. And then like when the guy comes out, I'm like, oh, I see. He was getting away from those guys. And I like the
Mhm.
guy's like, what are you doing? Like shoot him.
Yeah.
So then he goes, and they don't do the flash forwards yet. This is him running and trying to blend in with the crowd once he
Mhm.
sees Harrow.
Yeah.
And Harrow
So
demonstrates his powers.
the judgment,
He
the
does the
tattoo,
judgment.
the poorly CGI tattoo. Yeah. Good times. Whatever. He does a judgment thing. It's cool.
So
It's kind
he
of
has
cool.
like a what looks like an Amit, like a double-headed Amit thing.
Yeah.
I know I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm sorry. Because he
Yeah.
says Amit at one point, and then
Um,
Amit like multiple times after that.
mhm.
So I don't know how to pronounce it. I will say that right now.
Yeah. And we don't
Um,
know if they're crocodiles or alligators. I just don't
that's
know.
true. Just like Loki, we did not know. Um, so yeah, I like the visuals of, not the CGI that you're talking about. I'm just saying like the idea that he grabs the person's arms, he lays the cane across his arm. I like the ritual of that, and just
Yeah.
the visuals of it. I think it's cool.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure he picked and chose who was righteous. Like to me, I feel
Mm.
like, yeah, that old woman's not going to help in the army that he's creating, whereas that much younger man probably could help. So he's like, yes,
Yeah.
we are looking at an honest person, this is great. And then that woman's like, I've never done anything wrong. He's like, yeah, you were going to. And it's like, really, was she going to do something bad? You didn't even say, yeah, you did, you're lying. He was like, no, you will
Yeah.
do something bad, old lady.
Mhm.
And it's like, all
So
right.
the funny thing, the interesting thing, I get what you're saying about like the judgment, and is he partial or is he truly impartial? Like that's one thing we have to really figure out here. The interesting thing is like how immediately they die.
Yeah,
Like
well,
that's crazy. That's crazy to me. I'm like, what? You die immediately?
I would say he's like if we're looking at this like symbiotes, like he is more like Cletus Cassidy and Carnage, like they just work well together, versus like an Eddie and a Venom in the Steven and Khonshu situation. So when I say he's picking and choosing, it's obviously more it's Will that's going through him, but since they are they have a better synergy, it's less about like, oh, who's taking over here, and more just like, yeah, this all works together is what I think.
Right. Okay.
Because obviously we see when he tries to do it to Mark or to Steven later, he can't. Like he can't go one way or the other. So it's not like he can control it. I just think that he is so in sync with Amit that it, like his will is her will. Like they just work together that way.
Yeah, I could see him definitely having an influence over it too, for sure. To be like, oh yeah, this is how technology works, and like I'll explain it to Amit, whatever. Like, you know, like yeah, this is bad, killer, whatever. I will say one thing. I want to clarify one thing that you're saying. It seems to me that the Khonshu Moon Knight element is only attached to Mark's identity, not Steven's, which is why Steven. Yeah, 100%.
I think
it feels
no,
like
he's Moon Knight. He just doesn't want Steven to be Moon Knight because he doesn't like working with Steven.
No, so there's that element. But I genuinely do think that it was Mark that, and I think we're going to see in later episodes, but it was Mark that originally discovered the Khonshu thing and got possessed, whatever it is. And that once that happened, the DID is so real that legitimately Stephen cannot activate the Moon Knight thing, and that's my theory so far based on everything that's happened. But like I think that's legitimately
he doesn't
the
know
case.
what Moon Knight is, so then that doesn't like it's not really something you can state, because were he to know it, he could call on it, is what I'm saying.
Yes,
he doesn't know it, so then we don't know that it doesn't work for him. We just know that he doesn't. One, Khonshu doesn't want to work with him because he's not a trained assassin mercenary. So why would you even bother with Stephen when you could just use Mark?
True. Right. But yeah, and that's why I think like the Khonshu thing was a part of a mission that Mark was on. And that's why like it's only associated with Mark's identity right now, or Mark's altar, as opposed to the Stephen altar. And this is going to get ultimately confusing. Is like, are we calling him Mark Stephen? Like, ultimately, but because I only know these altars as altars. You know what I mean? I don't know who the genuine person is yet, because there's no legal writing thing. It's like even when he's at the museum, he's like, people at the museum is like, "Hey, Mark," and he's like, "It's Stephen," and I'm like, "Wait, oh, what?" Okay, yes, so
but when Harrow gets there, he's like, "Oh, I thought this was just a cover, but you really are Stephen Grant and you work here." So there is official stuff saying Stephen Grant works at that museum.
That is true. That is true. To jump
that's
ahead,
what I'm saying.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's Stephen. Mark's
the altar. To get your head around when you've read the comics. It is. There are altars. Again, I hate saying that, but like there are different personalities that take to different aspects of what Khonshu can do, but it is that human being. That's the whole point, is that Khonshu takes over a body, so it is just that body has access to what it can do. Whether or not the personalities want to engage with that is a different story.
Right, but that's, you did say that's how they wrote it in the comics, and you weren't particularly a big fan of the comic stuff, so I'm pretty sure that there may be some re-exploitation of that, because there's an element of like the Mark character who is a billionaire, isn't he, or something like
Stephen
that?
Grant.
Of
in the comics, Stephen Grant is a millionaire, or a
Stephen Grant's a millionaire, or billionaire, or whatever it might be. He's the rich guy. He's the
gentleman.
Yeah, it's the Marvel equivalent of Batman, apparently.
With no. In the comics, it plays out more like Stephen Grant is like this movie producer, and he like makes Moon Knight movies.
Yeah, that's why I hate the comparison. It's constantly like, I don't think it's a good enough comparison to be Batman. It's just because they're rich guys that fight crime doesn't make it a Batman thing. But anyways,
he's closer to Daredevil.
Powers. Yeah. Good call. Yeah, so you're saying, okay, so Khonshu has the body, but whether or not which and only the Mark alter can call it forward. Apparently, is what
Well,
we
he
know.
saved. So in the comics, he saved Mark. So
Yes.
in his head, Mark is Moon Knight. But what
Right.
obviously he doesn't know ahead of time that there's the multiple person. Sorry, DID.
DID. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
what's going to make this series so confusing, and that's what I mean. Like, I feel like I think we as an audience know what's going on because we can fill in the gaps reasonably well. I just feel like we're watching someone else, aka Steven, always put the pieces of the puzzle together.
yeah. Well, this show is definitely a
that's
mystery.
like-
It's not.
Mhm.
It's not like an action adventure like the other stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or this episode isn't. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, we get to see
Mhm.
that he serves the goddess element. We already talked about it, and he wants a
Mhm.
scarab off of Steven. And Steven is trying to give it back because he wants no parts of this. And Khonshu, that's what I said, like Khonshu obviously is taking over at this point,
Right.
and being like, no, you're not giving him anything. And he's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I am trying to. Great physical acting by
Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac in this scene.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great physical acting.
And then this is where we start doing the jumps in time, which I like. Is kind of
Yep.
This episode is, as you said, like it's so Steven centric that it makes sense to not show what Mark is doing and just have it be from Steven's point of view of like things get too intense, he blacks out,
Mhm.
he comes to, and he's like, oh wow, what's going on here?
Mhm.
So yeah, we see that he obviously killed a bunch of the followers to get the scarab back. Then he gets into a van to drive away and goes in and out multiple times in the van, and then wakes up in bed and obviously thinks, well, that was just a dream, because we see all the stuff that's makes it seem like everything's in place. But then he's like, wait a minute, my fish has two fins. That's not right. And he goes and he gets upset about
And no
that.
dislocated jaw.
Yeah, I mean
the
that
fish.
looked like it fixed it. So it didn't seem like he was that worried about it. Like
Mhm.
after that scene, it seemed like that was the whole healing stuff that Khonshu powers can do. But yeah, I think he'd been over that by that
Oh, I
time.
didn't realize Khonshu had healing powers.
Well, the whole point
Cool.
is Khonshu won't let him die.
Right.
And
I just thought it was
that's-
fighting powers. I didn't
Yeah,
think it was healing as well.
No. It's just that's why he would pick Mark. This is what I was trying to get across, is that he's picking Mark. And again, a lot of this, when you read the comics, it's called into question if this is even actually happening. But if you take it at face value, yeah, Khonshu picked someone that can get the stuff done that he needs to get done. The complication becomes this is a person with DID. So as they phase in and out, sorry, I know I'm not trying to be dismissive, sorry, but as different alters take over, that causes an issue for Khonshu. And so in the comics, there's always this thing of him being like, well, I'm going to leave you then. And Mark being like, no, please don't leave. I love you, Khonshu, or whatever. So there's they haven't played that out yet, but I kind of hope they leave that out. But anyway, that's kind of the dynamic in the comics I have read. I know there's a bunch of comics, but
Gotcha.
I've read 2 runs now, and those are the dynamics at play. So it's not that he gives you fighting power. I mean, you get strength, you get he won't let you die. That's the idea, is that you can really take a beating. But obviously Mark already knew how to do this stuff as a mercenary.
Yep.
So it's easier for him. But yeah, he wakes up and he goes on the date, I believe, and that's when he calls, and the woman's like, yeah, I did have steak 2 days ago when you left me like alone, and you realize
stood me
it's
up
not Friday,
my
it's
date.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Which
Who
sucks.
does that?
But
Who gets stood up on a date and actually orders?
That's I get it, man. Just hey, I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat.
I mean, fair, but I mean, yeah, I just think that's crazy.
I like that she didn't shrivel up and go, oh, I'm so embarrassed. She's like, well, I'm here. I'm gonna get some food.
Yeah, fair enough.
True. And yeah, she tells him, lose my number. And again, some good acting from Oscar Isaac, as he clearly has no concept of what it means to how would you like your steak done. And he's like, good, very good. And he's like, well done. Like, thank you.
Good, very good.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh God, for a
I was
vegan
thinking,
to
but
eat a
like,
well done steak, that is, oh
I
man.
just think it's funny that because he's like, I just want all the tasty parts. Yes, please, thank you. And I just like that he's like, it seems like he's fighting back tears, but it's also funny dialogue. And I just thought, like, yeah, he's doing such a great job of balancing both
Yeah,
of the things. I do feel so bad for him in the moment, while also funny dialogue is happening.
yeah, yeah. It's so sad because it's, oh
Yeah, it's a bummer.
God,
But yeah,
it's, yeah, it's knowing stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, it's makes you unreliable to other people, but you're the one suffering, right? It's the roughest part of, I would imagine, what this is.
yes. So then he's on his way home from the date, eating the chocolates he should have been that he wouldn't obviously have given to the woman. I can't remember if she has a name. She must. I don't remember it. And then throwing out the flowers while telling his mother in quotation marks, like, "Oh yeah, you'd love her. She's great.
Mhm.
This is great. It all went well." Um, just another sad moment. And then he's home, and this is where he finds like the hidden compartment in his floor
Yeah.
to find the phone. And we get the scene from the commercial of Layla being like, "What's wrong with you, Mark? What are you doing with this accent?"
Mhm.
uh I understand her frustration. She said she hasn't seen him for months at this
Yep.
point.
Hasn't
Yeah,
heard from him in months and stuff like that.
seen or heard from him in
Yeah.
months. Yeah. And then he calls with that stupid accent. I can see the frustration in hanging up there.
Mhm.
uh and this is where Mark, I think this is the first time we hear Mark, and he's kind of
Mhm.
like, "Hey, if you keep going down this path, you're gonna get in trouble," which I think is the whole like, "Hey, stop looking into this, stop it."
Yeah, you need to stop kind of deal. Yeah.
And then we get like a bit of a horror mini, like a horror short film in his apartment building,
Mhm.
uh, as Khonshu is creeping up on him. There's the elevator gag again from the commercial,
Mhm.
which is all right.
It
I
plays out
was
very
surprised.
uncomfortable though. Like it plays out
Yeah, but this is
very uncomfortable with the old
that's the thing.
lady
In the
there.
commercial, they make it seem like she's like, "Oh, I hope you find your contact," and he's like, "Cheers," but that's not how it plays out in the
I
actual show.
know.
Like
It's like
she's very put off by him.
she's so scared. Like she's like,
I
"Hey,
don't think she's
this
real,
is a
but yeah, I the
person." Oh, I think she's real for sure. I think she's real, but like, and she's totally like skeeved out and being like, "Oh my God, please don't attack me. There's someone that knows me right here. Just like hit you," like that kind of stuff. Like she's scared, like really scared of him. And I
yeah.
get it. Like it's a screen to walk into, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, now we're gonna pretend like that wasn't what you were just doing." It's an unusual situation, which is why I liked when COVID was like, "No, I'll get the next one."
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
no COVID for Moon Knight though. But
So then,
yeah, that plays out very, very uncomfortably.
is this another one where like she goes to the fifth floor? She's like, "Yeah, yeah, this is my friend. This is my friend," knocking on the door.
Mhm.
This is this where it cuts to him on the bus?
I think so.
I think, yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't write that down, but I'm pretty sure it gets to like a fever pitch and then cuts to him on the bus,
Mhm.
and he sees Khonshu like outside and everything. It's like he's really haunted now.
Mhm.
Gets to work, and this, I have to say, I was like, is this really happening? But I again, that's part of the comic, so I can't really
Mhm.
read too much into it. It just same with the older woman, is that is an element of the comics where something happens, you're like, wait, but like, did that happen, or is he
Mhm.
really just putting this all, like, is this all in his head? I don't know if this is happening.
Mhm.
But I believe Harrow's really there, but it just seems like everything shuts down for Harrow. And I know that he's got another follower of Amit there with him, and then
Mhm.
a bunch of people kind of show off their tattoos, and they do the
Mhm.
funny Avatar joke. I did genuinely like it. I know some people didn't, but when if he first does the James Cameron Avatar, then he's like, "Oh, okay, then the anime," and I'm like, "Yeah, see, that's funny stuff. Good for you." um, and it's Hiro kind of explaining why he follows Ahmed and how she could have stopped all the terrible things that happened,
Mhm.
but she was betrayed. I believe he thinks that's what's happened here, and he's trying to judge Stephen, but he cannot. the scale will not go one way or the other for Steven, which I think plays into the whole.
He has scales in him.
I think
he's got scales in him.
For us, it's kind of like we only know of the two personalities, and who knows how many. I mean, in the comics, I know of three, but this I don't know if the show will touch on the third, and so that to me, it's kind of like, well, yeah, Mark would have to be much different than Steven, and so then you can't really go one way or the other here. It's going to be constantly in flux. And then people start streaming in, and he runs away, and then we get the Jackal kind of chase, which leads to Mark just convincing Steven, just let me take over.
Yep.
And then we get the shot from the commercial, go to credits. I think this is what you want to probably talk about, which is why did he have to convince him? Why did he have to convince him if he was clearly taking over earlier in the show?
Well, because I feel like, okay, so in the entire show, they're like, oh, he's the weak one. He's this. He doesn't know what's going on. That kind of stuff. From what I can tell, obviously, the trauma so much that he had to, there's probably an element of one of the alters protecting him in multiple ways, like one protecting the emotional component, one protecting the physical component to make sure that the emotional component could be safe, right? So Mark would be the physical component, like person to be able to physically take over from any kind of situation for fight or flight. And then other than that, because it's so probably draining for Mark to be out there, then he just basically stays as Steven the entire time. Or maybe that's like one of the best things of being like, here's his secret identity, is that Mark can't possibly be Steven or whatever it might be. Either way, it's just in that scene, it's very clear to me that Mark has done, and Khonshu have done a very, very good job of like actually keeping their identity away from Steven. And that's why it's like they meet each other in the mirrors and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, he doesn't know who Mark is. He's like, what's going on? He's just like being convinced. He's like, you look like me. Sure. And then he's just, all right, cool. I'll give up control and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he doesn't he has all these things to be like, okay, whether or not he thinks he's actually just sleepwalking or not is unusual to me now, right? That's what comes into question.
That he doesn't know that he has the
because he has all these like really, really advanced. Yeah, it's like, does he think he has a really bad case of, oh, like I should not sleep because I have the most vivid dreams in the world and I can't tell apart reality from the dreams? Or does he actually know he has DID? And that's where the whole apartment scene is very unusual to me. They're at the end of the episode then. Why are the alters meeting themselves at the end? The alters should know each other and should be able to talk to each other within his head like he was doing. But
I mean, this is why I think they shouldn't have brought this in. I know it's kind of a key part of it, but like I don't know that is an actual function of the idea that people say like, oh, I talked to my alters. In that sense.
It is. Because I've worked with a couple of clients with DID and I've worked with a couple of people.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
That's why I'm like so interested in alters, and that is so like some more than most, but that is something that is consistent amongst DID. And this is why I'm like, was this poorly researched, or was the idea of like, oh, we need to make a mystery that took the writing out of it? Because I'm like, I didn't think that was very strong writing for them to do that.
To do what?
At the end of the episode, be like, hey, like, who are you? Like, oh, I'm Mark. Like, all like that meeting of the first time of the alters. It was a weird situation. Like, for him to be like, who is Khonshu is more than enough. And for Mark to be like, Khonshu is this person that helps me protect you, should have been the reveal to Steven at that point. But the fact that it was like Steven was meeting Mark for the first time and then also finding out about Khonshu is a weird thing to me, because he should have known about Mark, and Mark should have kept Khonshu away from Steven at this point. So the interesting thing is how much is told through those snippets. And my thing is each episode going to be with different alter and putting together their part. So, for example, next episode, are we going to see the stuff that got cut out because it was clearly Mark / Khonshu taking over, right? Because it seems like Khonshu's the one that gives the suit and gives the powers, but Mark's the one that can still fight and beat off all the people in the Alps too, without the costume. So it's an unusual thing to me.
This is the shitty thing about when we being engaged in this and knowing that we aren't big enough to get the episodes ahead of time. Everyone who's seen the first 4 episodes says no, we don't see that stuff yet.
Oh God,
the stuff that's happened in between.
Okay.
That doesn't mean specifically we haven't spent a whole episode with Mark yet. They haven't said that, but they have, unfortunately, without saying specifically. It's just obviously through process of elimination. Clearly, they haven't seen what Mark was doing in between those times where Steven blacked out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
We still might have spent time with Mark. The way they said it made me believe that we didn't, but nothing was explicitly said to give me reason to believe that we haven't. It's just they were pretty clear. Like, I thought that would be the case. That second episode would be like, okay, and now here was those events from Mark's point of view.
Yep.
That isn't what happens. That's fine, but I think even knowing that they've seen the first 4 episodes and they still had a hunger to see what they missed in certain things leads me to believe that we probably stick with Steven for these first 4 episodes and keep having these jumps without seeing what happens in the jumps.
Well, I mean, I imagine the Mark episodes would be very, very minimal, because those would be the ones that would, if only they're playing around with the 2 alters, like you said, if there being a third alter in the comic book run, if they just play around the 2 alters, maybe just 1 to 2 episodes could be like, oh, here's the revealing episode, here's the revealing thing, like, oh, the Yelena episode that pieces everything together about, like, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, this person's arrived to move the plot along. Great. So Mark will probably arrive to move the plot along in episode 5, and then 6 will probably be the clue. Like, how many episodes do we have here? 6? Yeah. That will probably be the run then.
Yeah.
Episode 1 through 4 with Steven, and then episode 5 and 6, 5 with Mark, and then episode 6 with Mark and Steven and Khonshu together as a team. Baby. That's what I'm calling.
It works, but yeah, that's it is definitely a possibility.
That's my Babe Ruth. I'm calling my shot. No, I'm not. This is going to be too wild of a series to call anything. I believe.
Yeah, I like the character work for Steven. So that will be good, and maybe that will be the reason to stick with him for 4 episodes, because at least you feel like you've got something anchoring you. But yeah, my feeling is this was a good first episode. This is the only time I'll say it. I immediately thought, I wish this was just all out at once, specifically for how quickly everything seemed to happen, that I was just like, yeah, why am I not able to just watch the next thing now? Like, it didn't feel like a real episode of TV to me. It really felt like, okay, that's the end of the first act of the episode. What's next?
That's exactly how I feel, and I'm sure once the full series is out, we're gonna look at it differently. But I feel like, based on what you just said too, we can get to the 4th episode and still be like, all right, well, it feels like we're starting act 2, and then it's going to rush very quickly toward the end. If my shot is correct, that we're going to get a Mark led episode, and then cap off the whole series.
Peacemaker, I know that critics got the first 7 episodes, but that was so that they probably didn't spoil the Justice League. That makes sense to me, but I think it's pretty clear they're like, whenever critics get a batch of episodes, it's very clear that the people making it are like, this is the only way this makes sense. If you watch it as a whole like this, then you can review. So the whole piecemeal for us, I'm just like, as I said, Falcon and Winter Soldier made sense to do week to week. I don't think that they were able to actually pull off what people want out of it, but it worked for me. They felt like complete episodes. This didn't feel like a complete episode, and I will never bring it up again for this show. But I just feel like everything you said, it will feel better when everything's out because it
Mm,
was made as a whole. It was I
yeah.
don't think it was made in mind thinking like, all right, like first episode, here's what we're doing. Because it just felt like I got to see the first act
Mhm.
and didn't get a full story really.
Yeah. One of the things that concerns me, I don't know if it concerns me, if concerns the right word, but it's something I think about, is like because we're spending so much time with Steven, I think we're going to get to know Steven's mannerisms. I think we're going to get to know a lot of different things of like, oh, there's little nuances, like, oh, this color is associated with Steven, and there's a lot of this color that he's like grounded in reality, kind of like the Inception kind of stuff. It's like, oh, they're grounded in reality, like this, they're in this level now, and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know, based on the 4 episode thing that you're talking about being heavy. I wonder if they're refraining from showing us Mark a lot, because if we know a lot of Mark's mannerisms and the ideas and the way the behaviors and everything that the ideas and skill sets associated with Mark, it's like, how would there be too much that would conflict? Because there's already stuff that conflicts here, and I'm not like too impressed. Which I'm like, I feel that I would be more impressed once the whole series is out, and that's why I'm reserving judgment. But I'm like, even already in the beginning, I'm like, that's something that's inconsistent with a few things that a few of the details I had to, clinically really brush up on years ago for DID. And I'm like, this is, I
Yeah.
don't think that was put in a lot of thought. It's weird, but it is what it is, because it's not something that's well understood either. And I will say that DID is not well understood.
No, and I don't think it should be used in this, but
I agree.
that's it seems to be the thing people like about the character.
Mm,
So it would be weird to do the character if you're not going to incorporate that. I just think it
Sure.
makes it very awkward to talk about because how much are you going to give a real to life exploration of it if it still has to serve
Mhm.
a superhero audience?
Yeah.
And that
You can't do it
how
too much
elevated that
justice.
gets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I already knew from the comics that I wasn't that into how they portrayed it.
Mm-hmm.
I still think this is markedly better than what I saw in the comic.
Fair.
Um, but yeah, I can see a lot of ways this will go wrong for me. But for now, I can just hold on to I like Steven. And I thought that for this episode, they played
Mhm.
off the whole phasing in and out well in terms of I get the sense that like, yeah, if it gets too heightened for him, Mark can take over. I just think, as we kind of pointed out, the whole Mark needs to convince him to take over
Mhm.
doesn't really make sense unless we were just seeing the visualization of what was happening to him when the camera's going like like that. Like if that happens every time, then maybe.
Right.
And but then that still leads to you being like, why doesn't he know him?
Mm.
The show is called the episode is called the Goldfish Problem. Maybe he's just got a short memory span for certain things. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that is, you're right to bring that up, because short memory is one of those things with DID. The memory loss is heavily there. Um,
So
usually
yeah,
tied to
it's hard.
traumatic
Yeah, it's
events and
hard
all
for
that
me
kind of
to
stuff.
knock the representation just now because one, it's only the first episode, so
Mm-hmm.
we don't have, and it is so into the whole mystery box way of telling stories that they could explain this
Yeah.
next episode. They could explain it episode 6. That might be how it is crafted so that everything comes together. But also,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not the whole story. So yeah, I can't knock the representation just yet. All I
Mm-hmm.
could say is it does feel better to me than what's in the comic or what I read in the comic.
Right.
I should continue to
Mm-hmm.
make that clear. The 2 runs I read, one of them being the Lemire run.
Mm-hmm. I think what's going to be interesting is how this, like comparing this to Split, which was brilliant in its own right. I really, really enjoyed Split, but the thing that I find interesting so far is that there hasn't been that demand for Oscar Isaac to do that shift in scene yet. It's like, okay, he's Steve, and once Mark takes over, it goes black, and then Mark is only in voiceover as well as through the mirror scene right now. So it's not like we've had a scene where, kind of like in Split, where he'll be like one person and he'll turn into Patricia like immediately, and all that kind of
That
stuff. So
doesn't
we haven't
happen in the
seen
comics
those
I read,
acting things
though.
yet, which I
So
okay.
they're
So
doing it comic
I'm just
accurate.
wondering.
That's
I
it.
see.
They're doing
I
it, like,
see.
it
I
is kind
see.
of like you see him and then it just jumps and you're just in a different, like, basic. Well,
Gotcha.
he's in a different country, but in the comics that I've read, it'll just be that he just is somewhere else as the new
Gotcha.
personality. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going for the
there is no
realism
transition
angle.
that way.
Yeah. Okay. I
That
was
I've
wondering
read,
if there
that
was
I've read.
ever going to be a transition. And that's one thing that I want to point out, or like wonder whether or not that was ever going to happen. But if it doesn't, then I'm actually a little bit more interested in that version of it than him having to eventually just shift back forth and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see is the
yeah.
ultimate thing, right?
We will see. I think that's good for a first episode. We will come back to this and do the second episode when it's out. But
yeah, what do you think next week?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I think we'll stick with it. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, yeah, we have committed to doing the full season. So yes, thank you very much for listening to this. And we are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network, which means we're on the same podcast network as other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels. So please head there. Black Hole Films they've got their 250th episode coming out by the time you're hearing this a week from
Congrats
now.
to them.
That's great.
Yeah,
I'll be on that episode.
Nice.
And just a whole bunch of great shows, more than I've even listed. So head to thatshelf.com, find those shows, find our show. If you'd like to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. And yeah, we're at TDF Spoiled on Twitter, spoiledpodcast@gmail.com for email. So yeah, please get in touch with us. Let us know what you think of Moon Knight, what you're excited about, what you're worried about, if you are worried about it. And yeah, have a great day or evening, whenever you're listening to this. Just enjoy the rest of your time of being awake.
Have a great Moon Night.
Thank you. I knew you'd get us there. All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.